the International Criminal Court issued a warrant against Vladimir Putin. And it is more likely a symbolic act if he doesn't travel to 123 countries, which he's probably not going to do. So all superpowers do not recognize that criminal court. And so right now you see a lot of questions and comparisons on social media. Well, what about Bush? So what is the comparison of Putin against Bush? So you should never actually use these comparisons to excuse the actions of Russia. So if you consider the Iraq war illegal, if you consider Afghanistan illegal, if you consider all these individual acts that happened as criminal, you should also understand that what the Russians did in Ukraine was completely illegal. There was a specific reason for these wars, a specific strategy behind it, and then the excuses were made for the public, right? So with Bush, it was this mix of, well, because 9/11 and because we're saving people, and, you know, that was kind of the excuse given, and some very high-profile lawyers actually followed that line. And the intelligence agencies were asked to fix the intelligence around the policies. And kind of the same thing happened with the Russians. So they had two big problems. The demographics were terrible. Nobody wants children in Russia because it's such a dead zombie land over there. And the other problem was that a lot of the industrial production, especially for military purposes, was in Ukraine. That was built during the Cold War. So they made all kinds of stuff in Ukraine, rockets for the nuclear missiles. They made engines for helicopters. They made the ships and the submarines and all that stuff. So Russia couldn't make these things themselves. So they needed the Ukrainian industry. So two major problems, and the solution was right next door. So just do a blitzkrieg and just invade Ukraine as fast as you can, and you solve two major problems, and you solidify the future of the Russian regime. You get 40 million new citizens, and you also get all this industry. So then an excuse was hatched, well, NATO got too close and all that nonsense, and we're saving some people in eastern Ukraine from genocide and whatever. And that's basically what happened. So it is legitimate to compare Bush to Putin, but you have to do it right. You have to do it properly. There's this old video from General Wesley Clark on YouTube titled, "We're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years." So he tells a story about talking to high-level people after a meeting, and they told him, there's going to be all these wars. And he asked, why? And they answered, we don't know. It's just the decision that was made. So that's completely illegal if you actually plan wars and then come up with an excuse. And another factor is the official explanation about 9/11 and how this all happened and why this all happened and the years-long backstory. That official line is not really convincing. It's never been really convincing. And same goes for Putin's 9/11 in 1999, when these apartment bombings happened. And it really, really looks like the Russian intelligence service actually did those bombings themselves. They actually got caught planting explosives in the basement of a building, and regular police was called to the scene, and then the government claimed this was just an exercise. So this is a really, really lame excuse. It's fairly certain that the Russians did that themselves. And so, just like with America under Bush, after 9/11, you saw new legislation in Russia, the destruction of freedom, destruction of liberty. Now, Bush had Osama bin Laden as the big villain. And of course, there was a really interesting backstory of the United States training and arming the Mujahideen in Afghanistan against the Soviet-Russian occupation. That was, of course, a long, long backstory. And this even bled into Pakistan and the Pakistani intelligence agencies and so on and so forth. And so all this backstory became important later when people tried to make sense of all this, right? And it was kind of the same situation with Russia and the Russian war against Islamic terrorism. So Putin had his own bin Laden type villain called Shamil Basayev and that guy's family. And these people, they were involved in the past with Russian intelligence, and quite a few people had come forward and said that this was a war staged at the top, the Chechnya war. The small, tiny little country thing that claimed independence, and then Russia just took it again by force. So this war apparently was fixed at the top to make Putin popular, to create this national feeling of us against them and that sort of thing. So in the second term of Bush, the Republicans became really, really unpopular. Putin was viewed as a mafia-type former KGB agent who is conspiring with communist China, right? So that was kind of the opinion at the time of many, many people. And because of the internet, you saw more and more so-called alternative media that is very closely linked to classic conspiracy media. But at least at the time, these activists, they understood how dangerous the Republican Party was. They understood it was a two-party cartel with the Democrats. And they understood that Putin was a KGB asset conspiring with China. And that was a more realistic view at the time. So you got more and more people influenced by this alternative media over the years. And starting in 2008, there was a massive marketing campaign which then changed people's opinion about the Republican Party and about Russia. So within a few years, activists believed the Republican Party was going to save them from the big conspiracy, that it wasn't a tool of the big conspiracy. And people then suddenly believed Putin was going to save them from the big conspiracy. Isn't that amazing? You do a complete 180 degree and change people's opinions like that? Just by using marketing, mostly the internet. So some of the activists today, they are too young. They were not around back then during the Bush admin. They don't understand really that much about the Bush admin and the Republicans. Don't understand it's a two-party cartel, and they don't understand that they don't understand what Russia really is. Okay, so back in the day, some conspiracy media were actually telling you that the Cold War was fake at the top, that this was a staged tension. The superpowers secretly worked together, and they needed this tension to maintain their control and to justify these military budgets and destruction of freedom and infiltrating everything through intelligence. Right? Conspiracy buffs understood that back then, but not anymore. Starting in 2008, all the most interesting bits and pieces of information were eliminated so that people really don't understand what's going on. So Western mainstream was really soft on Russia, was really, really soft with Putin for a very long time, roughly almost 20 years. During the Bush era, the policy was ignore Russia, don't talk bad about Russia, let them do their thing, even though Russia was heading in the completely wrong direction. Russia could have just chosen to emulate, copy sort of the American model of running things. And Russia could have done that without taking a big risk for the ruling class, because it was all KGB anyway, and they had assets everywhere. And copying Western system would not have meant Western control over Russia. You can just copy all these things that work, but Russia didn't do that. And then came the Obama administration, and the policy of Obama was, let's not talk too bad about Russia, let them do their thing. Even when they invade Crimea, we're just gonna slap them with some lame sanctions, and that's it. It took until the Trump admin, actually, to get tough with the Russians. Even though Trump had these weird deals with Eastern oligarchs and weird stuff going on and that sort of thing, and tweeting, and talking positively about Putin and all that sort of stuff. If you look closely, the Trump admin was contained a lot of hawkish people who were against Russia. You saw new legislation against Russia, more and more sanctions against Russia. That's when things got actually tough. And so if you are politically interested today, don't fall for this internet propaganda and don't have these knee-jerk reactions, right? If you hate the Democrats, if you hate Joe Biden, and Biden says he wants to support Ukraine, don't automatically take Putin's side, and don't say that you want Ukraine to lose. This is not good for you. This is not good for the world. So you can't just take the opposite opinion on everything important, the opposite opinion of what the Democrats are saying. That's not how things work, right? So at any moment, Putin could disappear. Health reasons, being deposed, whatever. Putin can disappear at any moment, and the true Russian command structure can then claim this is a new start, this is a fresh start. And then within a few months or maybe 1 or 2 years, Western mainstream could become pro-Russian again. So would be a reset of the relations. What are activists going to do then? So they believed in this Russian savior fantasy for so long, and then suddenly, poof, it's all gone. It's all gone. What are they going to do now? Or the superpower cartel is going to choose the script of escalation. So they scare everybody even more. And then you'd have an open alliance between Russia, China, and North Korea. What are activists going to do then over here in the West? They're still going to stick with Putin and the Chinese communists and the North Korean communists? Are they really going to do that? Because this is a big trap. Now is the time to drop Putin and drop your support for Putin and come up with better ideas. Now is the time. If you wait much longer, this could become really dangerous for you. This is a huge trap. And so being pro-Putin right now is not something that scares the Western establishment. It's something the establishment wants. So if you're hypercritical, if you're mad, if you don't trust the government, you're supposed to fall for the Russian trap, because then the system can fight you much more easily. So check out the link to our Twitter, and check out candorintel.com, and yeah, you can also donate to us on Patreon.